Good morning. So one of the things that our faith values is interconnectedness. And traditionally, we tend to see this as physical interconnectedness of all beings, sometimes emphasizing our complex and sensitive ecosystem, maybe sometimes framed in climate justice. Well, I definitely agree with this aspect of interconnectedness. Today, I am going to lift up a more metaphysical interpretation. You see, there's been a lot written on what is known as the butterfly effect. And while this theory has been written on in many ways over maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of years, it actually has been attributed to a meteorologist, Edward Lorenz. He theorized that weather prediction models were inaccurate because not knowing the very precise starting conditions made the estimations of those predictions something that couldn't be relied on. He found that a tiny change could throw off the entire results of his predictive models. And while his science was very complex to lay listeners, he began to use a butterfly analogy to help explain the theory to non-scientific audiences. Thank goodness, because I had to do a lot of that reading. You know, I think you've all heard it, hopefully, maybe not, you're about to. It is the phenomenon where a butterfly flaps its wings, let's say in the Western Hemisphere, and then lo and behold, a hurricane is created in some other part of the world. Quite an extraordinary analogy, and even he would admit that that's not entirely plausible. But anyone who has ever attempted to create mathematical models that predict parts of our very complicated human lives knows the amount of time and effort put into the assumptions around the starting conditions for those models. So while a butterfly flapping its wings in one part of the world may or may not be directly related to a hurricane in another part, no one can deny the complexities of weather models or any other complicated human models of human experience. This phenomenon, for me, points to a very interesting aspect of human life that I've come to learn. The fact that our interconnectedness to one another and our world have actual profound effects on all of the components of that connection. I'm used to seeing the butterfly effect in the field of social epidemiology. In that field, it doesn't only focus on what puts all of us at risk for negative health outcomes or consequences, but rather likes to focus on what puts us at risk of those risks. There are many health examples where these secondary social constructs work to negatively serve a particular population, be it socioeconomic status, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, or any other key demographic. These become risks of experiencing more traditional risks. A little esoteric, I understand. So I'm going to give you a practical example from my own dear and lovely queer community. So in my own research, men who have sex with men tend to have or can have high levels of what's known as internalized homophobia, basically self-hate. Those with high levels of self-hate are less likely to get tested and know their STI status, or specifically their HIV status, and therefore they are at much higher risks of contracting HIV unbeknownst and either passing it around or slowly progressing toward AIDS themselves. These aspects of risk, self-hate, internalized homophobia, are often part of what epidemiologists have come to call social networking. These are very real relationships that we cluster together as humans, and those clusterings, those networks, pivot and play vital roles in our everyday lives. They are networks that exert a profound influence on our physical, emotional, and spiritual, I would argue, well-being. Lots of research has been shown that both the quantity and the quality of the social relationships really significantly impact specifically our mental health outcomes. Numerous studies have shown consistently that individuals with larger social networks encompassing diverse relationships experience reduced levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. The research is very clear that there are protective factors for psychological and emotional health in terms of being connected to one another. Deep relationships act as buffers against harmful effects of stress by providing emotional support, practical assistance, and different perspectives on problems. Deep connections provide opportunities for positive social experiences that can enhance our own feelings of happiness, joy, and satisfaction. The sense of belonging and connectedness fostered by social networks can reduce the risk of loneliness, which is a significant factor for our own mental and emotional health. Now, it's probably at this point you're looking around going, is this a lecture hall at a university or is this a church? Or at least I was feeling that way when I wrote this. So I quickly went back and said, there's got to be something I can write about Jesus. But I just preached on Jesus, and I don't think that is timely. So then I thought, well, maybe Buddhism. I've come to love Buddhism. And then I thought, no. There's much better people out there to talk about Buddhism. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's adequate representation of this phenomenon of social networking within our own Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. So I would like to lift up two of the very, very important influences that have happened over time, where if we do want to be spiritual or religious, and you're feeling that, where we become the hands and feet of God or the divine. And the first is in the historical fellowship movement that was part of our history in the late or mid 20th century. These were often grassroots efforts to create spaces of like-minded individuals to gather together, discuss, and deepen their support for one another in spiritual development. Some may have had clergy, many of them did not. And so it was this intentional community building that served a purpose to expand our faith movement across the country, from the east toward the west, and really underscores for me a practical example of people caring for one another in that deep interconnectedness that we now know scientifically is so positive in our mental and, I believe, spiritual health. And the second that I just have always come to appreciate is these small group ministry programs that were often built, led, and sustained by female-identified folks within our communities. These early spaces were often places where women gathered to discuss suffrage movement issues or reproductive rights. And even to this day, many of our own communities, including here, have thriving small group ministry programs, which are, I believe, a backbone for a healthy congregation and community, largely because of the scientific research that I droned on about earlier. I think that our faith, for many, many, many years, has embraced and lifted up all of these significant epidemiologic findings regarding interconnectedness. These days are really difficult. We have a looming climate crisis that seems a bit overwhelming. We have real threats to our democracy. And let's face it, every day is exhausting with the division across the country in ways that make us seem so fractured that maybe repair might not be possible. Or at least that's how I feel some days. Now, I'm up here alone, so can you raise your hand if you've ever felt that way? All right, good, I'm not alone. I can't see you online, but when I get back to my chair, I'll check, so. But this is when When those feelings start to bubble up and I start to feel the anxiety and the overwhelm, this is where I lean into our faith tradition. This is where I say to myself, wait a minute. For decades, this very faith organization, with all of its positives and all of its human flaws, has supported social connection and social networking within our community and well beyond it. So when I sometimes get that feeling that all hope is lost and the world around me might be a little shattered, I look to one another. I look to all of you. I look to our leadership. I look to other congregations, and I am inspired. I am inspired by the ability of members present here, now members who are part of our ancestry, all of the things that they have done and that you all continue to do to connect, hold, love, and heal one another in various ways. It's truly, truly remarkable, and our interconnectedness is really a powerful part of our faith tradition. So my hope for us all is that may each of us continue to be part of a community like this, and may it continue to be a part of you.